Audiobooks, reclaiming your time. One of the things I love about thee is that it's the book MJ said he would have wanted to be handed that day at the ice cream shop. One of the many things I wish I had stumbled upon earlier in life is I've been to read a book a week for the last 10 years. I've done pretty well at that, but it's hard. You have to find the time to read. I wouldn't read with my head hunched over into my phone while reading a book on Kindle walking to lunch. I wouldn't read while going to bed and fall asleep doing so, which has to be great for retention rates. I wouldn't read while doing cardio at the gym. I even tried it on a tablet. I did a lot of over those years. Since I got on the audiobook train, I listened to an audiobook. 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 I listen to an audiobook. According to my app's stats, I somehow find an extra 15 hours each week to read. That's 15 hours I used to spend on stupid mundane aspects of life that I've turned into a learning opportunity. I use Audible with a platinum membership and re-up at about $9.50 a book. I have the wireless Galaxy Icon X headphones and got the new Galaxy Buds with my S10 Plus, so I'm fully untethered. At the pace I read at, I typically get through about 2 books a week, or 80 to 120 books a year. This makes it possible to read that people are talking about. Principles by Ray Dalio? Got it. Measure what matters to learn about OKRs? No problem. Simon Sinek? Sure, there was his TED Talk, but do you know about Leaders Eat Last? Market Wizards Who? Bullshit Stories That All Success Is Luck by Malcolm Gladwell? MMHMM. Ultimately, it ends up being a $1,000 investment a year to turn your 780 mundane hours of life into a learning opportunity. I was inspired by this post and just signed up for a free trial account of Audible. It had an option of logging in using my Amazon account. Never knew Audible was an Amazon company. So which books do you recommend I listen to first? Thought I was the only one who used audiobooks to survive cat shit cleanings. So glad we don't have cats anymore. I use audiobooks during all of these same scenarios except going to and from work. When I used to work I'd listen to them on the drive though. 2 Audible features it took me a long time to realize were valuable are the 30 seconds skip, mainly for going backward because sometimes I zone out and miss stuff, and the button that lets you increase the speed of the narrator. The book I'm reading now was hella slow, so I sped the guy up 1.15x and it's just about right. Happened with the last book too. Had to go to 1.25x. Gotta find the balance between speed and absorption of the material. By is my favorite book. It's like 12 Rules for Life, but from a methodical billionaire. Same. I tend to go between 1.25x and 1.6x depending on how slow the narrator is and how fast I need to receive info to pay attention in that moment. I never advise people speed up to get through a book faster. Whatever speed feels like a natural conversational speed, that's the speed to listen at. And those narrators read very slow. Having Audible is like a cheat code. I took the suggestion from someone in the book thread and do most books at about 1.70x. This helps me crunch through some of the 500-page monsters in a decent amount of time. So far Audible has helped me take down 3 18-hour reads, and I'm starting on Thinking Fast and Slow today, 18 hours 31 minutes. I've recently gotten hooked on audiobooks as well, mainly to fill in the gaps, commute, etc. I don't think they are a substitute for books though, and some books still have a much greater impact when read and are easier to scan or come back to a certain section, etc. But I use it extensively for books on my someday or not highest priority list and ones I've read before and know are worth reviewing again. I personally tend to lean towards books read by the author, e.g. the level of enthusiasm and energy doesn't seem to be present otherwise when read by a narrator and usually puts me to sleep. Haha. I also sometimes read and listen to a book in the same time period. I've noticed it improves retention and makes more of a lasting impact by adding an additional dimension to the learning process. I always wondered how this idiot got so popular. I can concur. Audiobooks are fantastic. I listen while I drive and when I'm out and about. I must also say, laying down on the couch in my office with a physical book lowers the blood pressure more. I buy books irrespective of cost. I already spent $250,000 on college. What is $1,000 a year? I love audiobooks. I also listen to loads of podcasts, but I recently unsubscribed from a lot of them because while they're helpful, they usually don't have as many fully developed thoughts as audiobooks. Agreed. Some books would be terrible in audio format. For example, any book that is highly dependent on diagrams, samples, or math, isn't cut out for the audio format. Others, such as Principles, are methodically laid out as a resource you should look back on. For those, I also pick up the Kindle edition. Audible is definitely worth the value. My value code equals money spent or hours using the book lol. So $15 or 20 hours equals 75. See nothing wrong with being robotic lol. Also, could use an enjoyment scale from 1 to 10 in the value code. It would be cool if they could gamify it more in the future. Perhaps more badges, rewards, and quizzes if you finish reading a chapter or listen to a book for a specific amount of time. I'm definitely enjoying Audible. However, it would be cool to see new features and updates. Hope you didn't try it while driving a car. I've noticed the same. Some professional narrators sound like a speech synthesis soft. But haven't listened to a monotonous narration by author yet. Am I the only here who cannot do both things at the same time? Let's say work out and listen to audiobooks effectively. Even though I like audiobooks, I feel my retention of what I read is much higher compared to when I listen. That being said, which are your favorite audiobooks? Check your local library too. Every place I've lived recently I've been able to check out audiobooks and ebooks through the Overdrive app. You are not alone. I can only do the first 20 minutes of a cardio session or incline walking on a treadmill after the workout. Hitting high-intensity cardio or lifting I space out. Plus, I feel like good, powerful music helps you push harder when it counts. +1 for the increased speed. I typically listen to audiobooks at 1.5 to 1.75x normal speed. There's a lot of great articles out there on speed listening that break down the facts that your brain can comprehend words at a faster rate than what is spoken. Comprehension stats be reduced at 2x speed, I believe. This obviously depends on the subject matter and what activity you may be doing as well. Bonus, I also do the same for podcasts and use the trim the silence feature. The screenshot below shows the amount of time I saved from podcasts only. And this doesn't even fully represent everything since I got a new phone in 2018 and my stats didn't carry over from the old phone. By the way, Scribd has a lot of good audiobooks available and the first month is for free. Afterwards it is still cheap with a $9 per month subscription. I always start at 2 to 2.5 and go down gradually if I miss stuff. I always wonder how sometimes my brain adopts to 2.2, especially in my native language. And by the way, there is training involved too, so that you'll get better at speed listening with time. I find it crazy as well, like copies playing games and listening to books at the same time. However, if you have light walks or jogs with an audiobook, my retention rate is amazing. Also, sometimes I am at a place where I have listened to a certain passage of a book and I will exactly remember the words and emotions I had. Any other activity which you have fully mastered and don't need to waste thoughts on, so you can totally focus on the book, will work too. Funny enough, just sitting still or lying on the couch and trying to focus on a book is very difficult for me. It is definitely enjoyable to go on scenic walks and listen to audiobooks. At Offer, I exercise and gain valuable wisdom at the same time. I make sure to add bookmarks to the parts of the book that I might not retain and then go back to the bookmarks, hoping for more innovation in the future. I listen to audiobooks almost exclusively anymore. I am reading one real estate hardback at the moment but listen to 2 or 3 books weekly. Generally, I listen to 90% at 1.8x, and once in a while 2x if it is not business related. It's like slow motion if I listen at normal speed anymore. I do the same with YouTube vids only at 1.5x retention. I feel it is about the same as I used to retain when I listened at normal speed, but I haven't personally tested that myself. I rarely listen to music anymore unless I'm writing, which is rare. Audiobooks have replaced music for me, at least for the moment. Would be open to experimenting with uploading knowledge to my brain if possible. Have you played Rocket League on casual or steep? Pick any spot in steep and the playing is on autopilot. Plenty of mental space to focus on something else. Try listening at 1x speed. I can't pay attention. It's like listening to George Bush give a speech. I forget what they're talking about. Speed it up to 1.5x plus and I'm all of a sudden engaged. I hear a lot of people love audiobooks and I can't quite start to love it. I think this is why, 1. Different people comprehend information differently, so I heard. So it sweets to someone who gets info better by listening. 2. The way most people use audiobooks violates 100% involvement principle. We can call it Zen stuff if you want or whatever. More and more I find the importance of being present in the moment, and it is easier to be present when you put your whole effort in what you do at that moment. If I exercise, if I eat, and when I learn. And like author mentioned, usually people use audiobooks when they eat, exercise or do some other stuff. It is probably because of be super effective, do 100 things at once, do more bullshit. In my experience, when you do stuff 100% you do it better and faster and you actually get more time, so by doing less, you do more. Kinda this not necessary apply for women. I hear they are good at multitasking, not sure, hope this will not be considered as a sexism. I've started using Audible for my first read. If it seems like a book I want to reference later, I'll buy a hard copy. I'd never get through my reading list without being able to listen to them instead of just reading them. I love audiobooks, too. Mostly history and health and biographies. For other books, like MJ's, I like physical copies, because I have to put them down, write down notes, or just sit there and ponder what I just read and how it will change my life. It's a fun treat to pick several audiobooks out at the library via app on my iPhone and then pick them up on the way home from errands, and listen to them. Some are good, some are crap, and sometimes a good audiobook is ruined by having a narrator who inhales helium, or has GERD issues, but I plow through them easily. And, I'm always reading something hard copy, also. Who goes for listening and reading at the same time? I have heard this technique being used by some people for maximum retention, but I am not sure. Too much noise, lol. I love audiobooks, but I find is that if I'm listening to an audiobook, I tend to get distracted or daze off and realized I haven't been paying attention for the past few minutes. Sent from my iPhone using TaperTalk. That seems like a waste of energy to me. You don't need to retain everything in the book, just the most important parts. Audiobooks are great. I love them. Though I find that for some books, I need to read to absorb them. Audio just doesn't do it. For others, I pause often to reflect and manipulate what I read in my mind, which removes to the convenience. Another hack I use to reclaim my time that pair well with audiobooks is taken from Deep Workbook. The idea is to take a problem and mentally working on solving it, while doing other physical activities. What I do is, at certain points of an audiobooks, I will pause and take time to think about what I have learned from the book, how it compares to my existing knowledge, how I can use it. what I don't agree with, etc. kinda making my listening more active. Does wonder for understanding and retention. My eyes aren't the greatest, so I have a hard time reading. I also recently found out while being a test subject during some visual tracking software, that my eye movement patterns match that of someone with dyslexia. That didn't stop me from physically reading a book a week for nearly 8 years. The more I read, the better I got at it, too. My only warning here is I've seen a lot of people use different learning styles as an excuse not to do something. I may be looking into your Zen comment too much, but I find Zen a terrible way to live. The basic premise is that life is suffering, so the best way to alleviate that suffering is to eliminate thought altogether. For instance, I don't think living in the present moment is a good strategy to put together a diversified stock portfolio. You need to think about multiple things at once and think about the past and future. I also don't think there is any value to gain from putting my whole effort into picking up my cat's shit or taking the garbage out. If you read my other comments, I hint at there being a threshold for focus. I don't suggest listening too fast or multitasking with another activity that requires your mental focus. There is a time and place to put your whole effort in, but I don't believe that is all moments. When I code, I code. When I surf, I surf. When I lift, I lift. When I watch a movie, I watch the movie. When I go to dinner with friends, I'm at dinner with them, not on my phone. When I go in a float tank, I float. When I need to think, I lay down in bed and think. When I do, I listen to audiobooks. Well, excuse would be not to read. Probably whichever method you use is based on personal preference, isn't it? Shit. We will gonna go down the rabbit hole with this one, probably not the topic of the thread. I called Zen mindset sign. Zen is well-known term. I am not 100% sure about Zen philosophy, but from what I learned and experience about mindfulness and meditation, you have to watch the moon, not the finger, which means you have to get the experience it suggests, instead of learning the concepts. Then all those things become clear. But let's keep it to another topic, or DM. Yeah, do I read too much into it? Is it how you calm down after a busy day? I personally have not experienced yet a full day of mindfulness in everything I do, but I totally believe that it can be extremely productive. However, you may be able to train your mind to eat calmly and with enjoyment, as well as at the same time to get deeply involved into a book that you listen. Same with walking and listening. By the way, have you heard of thoughtful meditation? Cal Newport speaks about meditating on a certain problem and solving it with a certain technique while walking. Think Fast and Slow also describes how walking in your favorite rhythm can boost your brain power. And while you could use the time to meditate and being mindful, you might miss out on some genius thoughts, learnings, etc. that are hidden in audiobooks and in your own mind. You will be mindful every day anyway, while you are sleeping, so no fear of missing out the mindful part of your day. I think it goes deeper than that. And yes, it is possible to be mindful with everything you do, although if you need to train, and training is better one step at a time, mindfulness is not the final goal. The final goal is to meet yourself, which mindfulness is only a door to. But then again, aren't we going the wrong route in this topic? A Zen monk in Japan told me, if you try to be mindful all the time, you will be exhausted because it is hard work. I was also trying to be mindful all day long and what he said rings true. However, that being said, I do feel is good to apply single tasking to some activities such as eating a meal or buying groceries. Back to the topic, do you normally take notes while you listen? Or you do it after you finished the audiobook? I hit pause on my headphones and use the Audible app to take a note at that spot. If the book is dense enough to warrant a Kindle copy, I often review the notes and find them in text to reread the passages, mindset, principles, and as several books I have audio and text with notes in both. Haha, I'm like that as well. Love audiobooks in concept, but when I multitask with them, driving, treadmill, etc. I tend to lose focus. Guess it really is a case-by-case basis and doing what works for you. In my early audiobook days I tried to take notes inside the Audible app, but I literally never came back to them again. It's kind of unhandy to revise audio notes. Now I just pause the app and take a note, either just a quick sole one or as a part of a list. When a book bursts with relevant information at the end of the week, I sort all my notes wherever they belong, so the audiobook notes are a part of my overall system. I also have a list of books I read with their start and end date. Usually when I add the end date, I'll mentally go through the book from beginning to end and write down my key takeaways that I remember at this point into that very list. Audiobooks changed my life. Just listening on my drive has allowed me to learn so much more. My second audiobook was actually my first was How to Win Friends. Grant Cardone does his own audiobooks and they are awesome. He's super engaging to listen to. Another good one is Crushing It. He ad-libs a lot in it, which I think adds a lot. I used to commute to my job on bus and that allowed about an hour. Sometimes I just go joyriding on the highway and listen for hours and then drive back. I listen in the shower daily, but the only crappy part is I can't bookmark a section I like, so I usually go back and re-listen. I have a few personal rules when I use Audible. I always read a book at least twice if it's remotely good. Isaacson's book on Da Vinci, for example, sucks. Didn't even get halfway. His Steve Jobs bio was great though. I never speed it up. I want full comprehension. I never read fiction. It's a waste of time. Battles in Imaginary Kingdoms? No thanks. I'll watch a movie if I wanted to consume that type of content. Audiobooks can be helpful as you can use them in situations in which you couldn't read a normal book. However, I have found that usually the books that can be read easily via audiobook are usually shallow books that have one main idea and books that keep repeating themselves. I am not sure if many of these books are worth reading in the first place. A quick summary of such books should do. Just imagine listening to's just via audiobook. I couldn't do that. So much knowledge would be lost. When I use audiobooks, I will take bookmarks for sections that are interesting, greater than I will re-listen or these sections when I am not busy doing the dishes, etc. And I take notes. Some books are so much gold that you want to reread them from time to time. Greater than audiobooks are helpful for that. Listen to audiobook first, then read the book. This helps me to read the book a lot faster. Greater than as you kinda know the book, you know which parts you can skip and which party you should read thoroughly. Greater than as you read the book 2 times, you also remember more of the content. And as you listen to the audiobook at dead times when new to repetitive stuff, I find this to be useful. Hope this helps someone. I actually listened to and never got the physical copy. Lol, I agree with your points. Sometimes it is difficult to get all the ideas with the audiobook. However, I am listening these days when I am doing shallow work at my workplace and it is amazing because I save a lot of time. Can't say I agree with that. That's pretty fixed mindset and assumes everyone is like you. I'm currently 5 hours in and remember mostly everything he says, even down to his story about Dickhead Dead. My favorite section so far is the chapter regarding no shortcuts. I used to listen to them before I went to bed. You remember things better before you fall asleep. I avoided audiobooks for a long time, just like I did e-books. Then, I listened to World War Z, which is a full cast, and was completely sold. It kind of spoiled me though, and the narrator breaks or makes the book. I often start listening to some and quit because the narrator just doesn't have the ability I seek. For fiction, this is more important. I want someone who does voices for characters and acts out the story. I listen to a lot more fiction audiobooks because if I get distracted I can still figure out what I missed. For non-fiction, I need a narrator who is a good storyteller or has a great voice. Seth Godin reads his own books and does a great job at it. The guy who does Brandon Webb's books is another who sticks out. For non-fiction to stick with me, it needs to be a book that uses stories as a teaching method. For example, behavioral economics books like Freakonomics or Malcolm Gladwell's books. I love audiobooks. The main downside is that it's harder to go back and reference specific parts of the book in the future. With a physical book it's easy to bookmark a page or find the passage you want to review. Audible chapters used to not even have names, but that's been improving with some of the more recent and popular books. Still nowhere as good as physical books in that aspect, however. The other downside is that some books are great, but the narrator is awful, which makes it pretty hard to enjoy the book. Some authors should not read their own books, and some narrators should not be narrators. Audiobooks work best for me when driving long distance, cooking, or doing any type of household task: laundry, dishes, cleaning, taking out the trash, etc. Truly a motivating post here. I too remember when I discovered Audible and realized I had to pay a monthly subscription to have the convenience of listening to books wherever. On top of that, I would pretty much have to buy the books after the free credit and pay the subscription. For almost a year, I justified not being a sub because I absolutely despised recurring bills. However, one day I did the trial and I've been a member ever since. You just cannot beat having good wisdom at your ear tips with a great audiobook. One of my best discoveries yet in life is the power of our libraries. Audiobooks are awesome. I never blinked at the price, but I've found that I can never convince anyone to pay for books. I have a couple friends who always pull the lucky card on me and ask me how to improve their lives. I always tell them to read through audiobooks. They always say they have no time and I am always busier than they are. So their go-to at that point is $40 a month for 4 books isn't worth it, as they pay their $60 bar tab. I listen to audiobooks in the car, but nothing deep. Multitasking is a myth. If it's something good, it's worth giving your undivided attention to. Reading Grant Cardone Obsession right now, and funny enough he mentions, don't read hundreds of books and get lost in all that information. Read a few books and turn those books into your Bible and reread them again and again until that information is second nature. Funny enough, Obsession Way sent my favorite book. It was more of a motivational rant. Hiring section was gold, though lots of notes. I read roughly 2 to 3 self-help books per month depending on the size of the book. 30 minutes to an hour daily reading. I originally started with paperbacks, then finally made the move to the Kindle or ebooks and absolutely love it, and the ability to highlight, quickly define words, etc. It's made my vocabulary expand, and I can also export all of the highlighted notes via email. I also write notes as I read, or at the end of each chapter, as it's absolutely essential to take notes while reading self-help books. Take notes on that for those who don't take notes. Anyway, I've never tried out audiobooks because I've always felt like I'll get too easily distracted. Seems like some others in this thread have the same concern and totally forget what the person speaking was just saying. How do you combat this? Even if I'm just sitting down and listening with no distractions in sight, I'll probably go on my own thought path more likely than not every so often. I'm definitely open to trying, as I want to consume more information and knowledge, aka read way more books, and have been trying to look into ways to speed up my reading, but then I just don't process the information as well and begin to rush. I'm mostly concerned with retaining the info, as what's the point of reading it if you're not going to actually absorb it and then apply what you like into your life? For those avid audiobook listeners, what's the most optimal route to take here? Thanks. I actually find this a powerful aspect of audiobooks. I can tune out and tune in as the material quality waxes and wanes. With paper, when it gets dull, I stop reading it and never return. Whereas because I am doing something else, I can write out the less interesting bits. I have finished various books, with value received in later chapters that I know I would have not made it through in print. As a very early Audible subscriber and CD and even tape, some of us remember them, listener, I've consumed a good couple of thousand books this way. almost all in the car, or on a ride mower, neither of which would have allowed any print consumption. Like someone else noted, I try 2 to 2.25 and work back down to whatever is necessary for the narrator and material. As noted above, I find my brain can keep track of the quality of what is being narrated and tunes back in when the material is useful. Very occasionally I will re-listen to a book and find I missed really important concept, but I'd say that was less than 10 books of, literally, a couple of thousand of a 20-year period. Also, audiobooks are much better before bed as are print than e-readers, tablets, etc. due to the lack of blue light emissions which will negatively impact sleep quality. When do you take notes, if at all? I absolutely agree that audiobooks are the shit. With that being said, it's fine to just focus on whatever the FCK it is you're doing instead of constantly try to get that $1 million idea or whatever it is you think you're doing by listening to an audiobook, you know. Calm the FCK down. You don't need to consume all the info in the world in order to be successful. A dating coach guru even pretended that it's so important to learn and listen to an audiobook even when waiting to get off the plane or whatever. No, it's not. Most successful people don't even consume that much information from everyone anyway. After a while it becomes pretty trivial and the same success principles are just rephrased in the next book. Most of the Fortune 500 CEOs read about 60 books a year. A little more than one a week. The only work-related book I've read that is Dense's Principles by Ray Dalio. I've read a lot of books on leadership and most of them could have been summed up by a blog post. I am also a software engineer, so I'm used to picking up 1,000-page, physical books, completely packed full of information, and digesting it over the course of a 2-week period. I also look at it this way. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine, specifically the neocortex. As you feed your brain information, it strengthens neural pathways through myelin generation, which improves synaptic performance. It typically takes 5 repetitions to commit something to memory. So, your brain is going to change with or without your conscious input throughout the day. If you can make those moments count, do. I feel like focus and focal points are things that we train our brain to do. Watching Game of Thrones with groups of friends, I'm surprised at just how many people, when watching the show in a dedicated environment, wander off into their own thoughts. In this last episode, we had to rewind because multiple people missed the climax while they were staring at the screen. Similar things happen if we go to see a movie. It's like people now have collective AD. If I am having trouble focusing, one tactic I use is inner voice reflection. As you hear the words of the book, immediately repeat them using your inner voice. For a similar duality, notice the difference between reading some text and reading some text out loud. For me, I notice both my inner and outer voices when I read out loud. This is the same idea used to initiate meditation by practicing mindfulness on breathing. Final tip on multitasking is that multitasking reduces the effectiveness of each task. That's why it's important to only multitask with 2 things, where one is active and the other is passive instinctual. I also find it necessary for these tasks to use 2 different senses. For instance, walking requires very low levels of physical and visual focus. Most of us do this instinctually. Reading a book while walking also uses physical and visual focus, so it makes for a poor combo. But listening to a book while walking uses a different set of senses and is easier to coordinate. Going deeper, I really do not advocate for listening to audiobooks for passive tasks. If you are driving to work on the same route you always take, your brain will be in a very passive mode. If you are driving into an unfamiliar part of town with Google Maps narrating where to go, you are not in a passive state, you are in a very mentally active state and should not multitask with an audiobook. If you're cooking a meal you've always known where your body does the motions, an audiobook is great. Trying out a new recipe while reading ingredients or preparing a large meal with multiple dishes for a group of people likely will take your full attention span. For me, I've found about 15 hours a week where my mind and body are on autopilot doing tasks that require low to no level of active involvement. Those are the moments I try to capture as learning opportunities. If I have a busy week full of new things, that number drops, sometimes to as low as a few hours. If I find myself dreading the moment as wasted time or am completely bored, it's probably an opportunity. I no longer mind spending time cleaning up my cat's shit or doing some dishes. Finally, mindset plays a huge role. Some people are reading as a means to ends to try and make $1 million. I read because I am genuinely interested in the topics. I want to learn about leadership. I want to grow as a person for personal fulfillment. I am interested in listening to a book on futurism where I imagine a post-scarcity world. That's exciting. If you're only listening as a means to an end when you would rather be listening to a morning talk show or music, your interests aren't aligning with what you want to focus on. I've only ever used audiobooks to read, since I've never had the attention span to sit down and read for an hour or so a day. I really like listening to audiobooks since it feels less like you're reading a book, and more like listening to somebody teach you insightful things about life. Plus I have the ability to multitask while I listen, which is pretty nice. I also want to mention that libraries usually have large amounts of audiobooks on disc and many have large digital libraries too. Plus, there are both and which give you access to thousands of audiobooks with a library card. I also suggest and series are more like lectures by some world's top minds. I still read physical books every morning when I drink my coffee, but audiobooks are king when out and about. I tend to read the more serious books on actual physical copies where I can highlight with a marker and really study the text. I started listening to audiobooks on a daily basis and I've never looked back. You can listen to them while doing most things. It allows you to truly be 2x as productive on any given day. My favorite thing is going for a walk and listening to an audiobook. Getting your steps in, vitamin D, and learning. Hard to beat. I typically listen at 1.5x times and 159 titles in my library. Addicted to Amazon sales. You are not alone, especially while driving and maybe the traffic is heavy. After 10 minutes realizing I did not comprehend absolutely anything, on top of that, it is even more harder when English is not your native language. Scribd has different languages audiobooks and 1 month for free. Thank you for your suggestion, but I will stick to English language books. These brings back memories of when I was a pizza driver. I did the job for about 14 months and early on realized it could suck a bit less, if I somehow managed to learn new things and get new perspectives. From books, or if you will, audiobooks. In that 14 months I listened to 100 plus audiobooks. I listened to all the books at about 1.75x to 2.00x speed. Because once you get used to it, normal speed is just very slow. Whenever I had 5 minutes of time I took notes of what I had just listened to, or went back to the book after work was over to revisit stuff. I listened to everything from business books, biographies, autobiographies, fiction, non-fiction, kids' books, classics, science and anything in between. And I learned a shit ton. I still listen to audiobooks whenever I can. They are such a godsend. Learning while doing chores / whatever? Hell yeah. I love audiobooks. I used to read on the way to and from work as I was on a quiet train, but now find myself on a noisy and crowded bus. Further motivation BTW, and audiobooks have been great for me. The is what I'm listening to. Great listen. I've found it helpful when I want to really dive deep into a book. It's how I consumed MJ's books and still am rereading. I use the audio mainly and make notes in the ebook and in a pocket notebook. Reading is also faster than listening, and there are plenty of times when it's more convenient, so Amazon's Whisper Sync feature is super useful. Mr. 992, Try making a little time to sit and listen or read by itself next time you really want to get into a book. I listen during my 9 to 5 whenever I've got a mindless task, but sometimes even that is distracting enough that I realize I'm not actually getting everything I could from the book. What effect would listening to Bush at 2x have then? Put you to sleep faster? Absolutely love audiobooks and by extension podcasts. However, as has been noted, it's more difficult to absorb relevant information while on the move, etc. If I'm not driving, I'll either use a dictaphone, stop the audio and pop a note on my phone, or take a screenshot of the position of the audio so I can go back later and take proper notes. I'm studying a book at the moment and, although I have the Audible version, I bought the Kindle version too. Wow, what a game changer Whispersync is. Listening on the Kindle app while displaying the book means it's much easier to absorb the information, especially as it highlights the text as it goes along and turns the pages. It's also so easy to highlight and annotate relevant paragraphs as I go and then export afterwards. No good for times when you want to multitask, but if you need a deep work session, it makes learning and researching that much more efficient. Downside, of course, is that you are buying twice. I've worked up my listening speed to about 2.5 to 3.5x, depends on how fast the narrator is over the past 3 or 4 years. Anything below 2.5 feels slow and will get me distracted. We'll explain shortly. First, let's borrow a principle from speed reading. The logic is that the faster you read, the more focused you become and the less room there is for other thoughts to come in. So paradoxically, the faster you read, the higher the comprehension becomes, since you are more focused on the task at hand. For me, this is the principle I use for audiobooks. When I first started using this format, it took me around 3 books to really get used to the format at first, and was able to start absorbing information this way and feel like comprehension started to grow. Once I got used to it, then I started noticing my thoughts drifting from time to time, and obviously when you lose focus, comprehension goes to zero. The method I used to tackle this was to speed up the audio to first 1.25x. Once that felt normal, then went to 1.5x and so on, and now I'm comfortably on 2.5x or higher depending on the narrator speed, which feels like normal speed but still keeps me engaged so I don't lose focus. Generally, if I reread something, I can take it 1 or 2 levels higher. According to peer review studies, audiobooks while multitasking is no bueno. I think this thread should be notable. I do the same thing and it's an amazing use of time. A big thank you to everyone. Because of this thread I signed up for Scribd and have found very valuable books or audiobooks for free and have been able to listen to some gems while doing admin work, which is brilliant. When I was starting my business, I would listen to 2 to 3 audiobooks a week while packing and shipping customer orders. I loved it. My employees now do all the packing, shipping and mundane tasks I used to enjoy and leverage as my education time. And sadly, the tasks I now do at my desk don't seem to be compatible with absorbing information in audio format. I still listen when I can while driving, etc., but have cancelled my Audible subscription as I have a backlog of about 12 books to get through. I'm currently listening to Shoe Dog and Measure What Matters. I'm sure you sometimes find your mind wanders while reading and you'll simply go back and reread the passages where you lost focus. You can use the 30-second rewind function on an audiobook for the same thing. Practice will help. You'll soon learn the times and activities that work best for you. I have nothing against audiobooks, but I prefer good old reading. I read faster than the pace of the audio, so it just helps me save more time. I also like to take notes and highlight while reading, so I can always go back to it for reference. Kindle has been great for me. It's on my phone and I can take it anywhere. I guess whatever works, works. Book summaries at 2.33x equals life. BRB read entire book in 15 minutes. According to a little Vietnamese woman I met at the airport, you can contact Audible support and change your membership to Silver, which will halve your monthly bill and credit allowance. I listen to the same books over and over, so I don't need a new one each month. Also, and I'm not sure if I would do this, you can contact them and return books, no questions asked. This girl had a ton of books downloaded on her phone that she had returned. She even tells them she wants to return it so she can download another one. They don't care. It's all digital anyway. A good tip for those of us on a small budget. TLDR, Audible can be treated like a library for $7 a month. I'm the same. The X helped make sure I got real good at tuning things out. I haven't caught myself saying aha yet though, lol. Another thing I hate is when I'm driving down the road and the author says, with repeated warnings, not to skip this step. Currently there are many books for sale at 2 for 1 credit on Audible. It's just for 2 more days, so be quick. I'm still figuring out which ones I'll buy. Quick question, do any of you listen to the audiobook and read the book at the same time, or do you read a certain book and then listen to entirely different audiobook? Just wondering because was curious if it sinks in more by consuming both at the same time or if it made no difference by trying to hit 2 birds with 1 stone. Yes, this the Pareto principle at work. 20% of the books deliver 80% of the content on a subject. Great books should be knitted and read once a month. It reminds me of motivational speaker Bob Proctor. The guy has been reading his copy of Think and Grow Rich. Great post. Also, if there's an app called Voice Dream Reader for those books that there's no Audible version for, the voices were a little robotic, but you get used to them and you can still consume information at an amazing rate with it. You can also sync it with your Instapaper, Pocket, Evernote, etc. to have an article list read to you. Also, the first thread I ever posted on this forum was one on how to convert e-books to audiobooks. I think that 1 to 2 books per day was an exaggeration unless they're really short books, but you get the point. Even better than e-books sometimes is book summaries. While it's not going to give you the full picture, I find that these summaries usually do a good job of encapsulating the most important ideas from a book or audiobook. Sometimes it's simply not worth devoting 8+ hours to one idea, and 15 minutes is more sufficient. You can usually pull 80% of the good info with a summary. And if you really find the summary compelling, you still have the option to buy the book or audiobook. It's almost like a sampler. Some good methods to find them. Subscription summary services. Good companies include Blinkist, GetAbstract, Philosopher's Notes, TED Talks. Often you can find a good summary of an author's book in their TED Talks. YouTube. There are many channels dedicated to providing summaries of books. Just search summary on YouTube. Review articles, search review on Google. Summary articles, search summary on Google. Have any audiobooks that stood out more than the others? Guys, I'm gonna make a thread on this, but there are a couple ways to get your iPhone to read any textbook, article, web page, whatever to you in the nice, clean Siri voice. The new one sounds great when reading out loud. It's essentially like converting any book to an audiobook. This is one method. You just swipe down with 2 fingers and the entire page is read aloud to you. The other method is voiceover. If people are interested, let me know and I'll prioritize writing the thread and put it up within the week. Otherwise I'm just gonna do it whenever. Was my first audiobook, and back then it worked a treat. But now I need the book in my hand. I keep podcasts for audio while I'm training or doing other stuff. You can't scribble in an audiobook, haha. But it's a great option to have in a pinch. When I first heard about and was keen as mustard to start reading it, I was away at work for a month in a remote location and had no chance to get a physical copy. Well, if I'm multitasking, I usually only listen to fiction or autobiographies, as I have realized that I can't seem to retain hard non-fiction when multitasking. So when multitasking, it has to be something that draws me in quickly. A couple books I really enjoyed lately is The Gambler William C. Rimpel Outlaw Platoon Sean Parnell Echtin Sandrogina Calcator Never Quit Don Reardon, Jimmy Settle Why We Sleep Matthew Walker PhD. As you can see, it is quite random. That works in a pinch, but the voice is just so mechanical for obvious reasons. It's no replacement for a professional reader or the author reading the work. Pauses, emphasis, humor, etc. all add to the experience and tone of the book. I thought that as well. I carry a pocket notebook. So, when I hear something I like, I stop and write it down. Not the new one. The new one is very good and natural sounding. The female one at least. That is really nice. Can you get it to read PDFs and websites on Mac? Yep, D. Does listening to and while considered multitasking? I guess it is. Well, is it a bad thing? Because I found that multitasking can hurt your comprehension or your focus. Need your opinion about that. My personal experience is that I can learn a lot while driving, walking or working out. My brain tunes out safely, I believe, and over 300 miles without issue when focus is needed on the road, etc. The issue I realized quickly is covered above. You need a way to keep notes, at least I do. When driving, that has to be audio, obviously. That was a dictaphone in CD days, and now an app. Without note-taking, for the key points, ideas on application, etc., it's harder to apply later. You learn, but not nearly as effectively, IMO. Humans don't multitask, they task switch, so the reality is focused consumption of information will always be better, but we all have to make the best of the overfilled hours we have. YMMV, of course.